Welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Veronica and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please check below to see if you've subscribed to our channel. It's 100% free and just allows our stories to pop up on your feed more often. Standing at the very top of the non-sapient species was the Phloryx, the undisputed deadliest animal in the galaxy. In contrast, among the sapient species, humans held the top position on the list of the most dangerous. This eventually led to the legendary partnership that would inevitably result in the foundation of the First Galactic Empire, a period of time known as the Beast Tamer's Age. The following transcription is based on the earliest preserved observations of the Ultimate Alliance that once reshaped the power structure of the galaxy.
Are you filming, Zoner?
The recording began, showing shaky images of Professor Sorvar, who was crouching down behind a huge shrub, filled with purple leaves and thorny vines. The violet foliage reflected an eerie glow in the weak light of the early dawn, creating spots of shadows across the professor's scaled features. Dewdrops clung to the jagged edges of the leaves, occasionally dripping onto the soft moss-like ground beneath them. The air was moist with humidity, the image quality being good enough to spot the mist. Professor Sorvar was a typical Gridaran, yellow eyes, scaled face, and the bony crest over his head that arced backwards in three distinct ridges, each one marked with the faint green bioluminescent streaks that shone gently with his heartbeat. He was dressed appropriately in the dark protective suit designed to blend with the shadows of the jungle, its fabric reinforced at the joints and vital areas with flexible armor plating. Despite the practical nature of his attire, he hadn't abandoned the binoculars that a Xeno observer like him loved to keep around his neck. They hung there, an expensive piece of equipment that gleamed dully when caught by the occasional shaft of light that managed to penetrate the dense canopy above. The person behind the recording device, presumably a standard Gridarian, forehead attachment video capturing equipment of its time, was Zoner, someone whose appearance and background are unknown, saving for the employment relationship with Professor Sorvar. It was implied several times during the recording. The camera stabilization system struggled to compensate for his movements, creating a slight wobble in the footage that was characteristically of early xenobiological field recordings from this era.
Yes, Professor, I'm recording,
said Zoner from off-camera, his voice louder than Sorvar's had been. His tone carried a hint of exasperation, suggesting this wasn't the first time they'd had this exchange. Shh! Professor Sorvar hissed sharply, despite being the one who had asked if it was recording. His yellow eyes widened with alarm, the vertical pupils constricting to thin lines against their golden backdrop. In a sudden movement, he pulled Zoner closer to him in the hiding spot, his scaled hand gripping the assistant's arm with surprising strength. The abrupt motion caused the image to lose focus, shifting to just purple leaves of the shrub, recorded from an extremely close distance. The camera now captured nothing but a blur of violet hues, interspersed with the occasional glimpse of thorny protrusions, its tips shining with some kind of natural secretion.
Keep your voice down,
Sorvar whispered from off-camera, his tone a blend of irritation and concern.
This is the home world of the Phloryx. Being spotted means death.
There was a pause, filled only by the sound of Sorvar's breathing.
Were you even listening to my explanation while we landed the ship? This isn't some university field trip where the worst that can happen is a failed grade.
With the recording device still capturing just leaves, Zoner replied, "It's hard to remember everything you say when you never stop talking, Professor." The words carried a sting of insubordination, though tempered with a familiarity that suggested this wasn't their first expedition together. Sorvar laughed in a low voice.
It is only natural that someone who knows a lot about the universe would talk like a lot, my young friend.
The leaves shifted and fell as Sorvar adjusted his position.
Make sure the lights from your camera are reduced to minimal brightness. The last thing we want is to be spotted by a creature who likes to play with his prey."
He paused, and when he spoke again, there was an undercurrent of excitement in his voice.
"We'll be the first to record Florix behavior in their home world. Such achievements don't come without risks."
Zahner said nothing, but the image grew shaky, revealing a nervous adjustment of the recording equipment. The focus of the video slowly returned to Sorvar, who was now using his binoculars to observe something in the distance. His scaled fingers gripped the optical device tightly, adjusting the focus like someone who had done it 1,000 times. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and one of his hands dropped limply to his side, as if all strength had left it. Then his whole body began to shake, a tremor that started at his shoulders and worked its way down to his feet.
"Record what I'm seeing, quickly!"
The professor ordered Zahner, abandoning his observation to use his arm to pull Zahner closer. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the urgency in it was unmistakable.
"Point it to where I'm pointing! Don't miss this!"
The video recording became unfocused, and after showing leaves and total darkness as Zahner fumbled with the equipment, suddenly an image appeared. Just a spot of light at first, then zooming in until it took the shape of a creature standing beside a massive tree trunk. The autofocus struggled momentarily before sharpening the image, revealing details that would someday be studied by xenobiologists across the galaxy. There, illuminated by the soft glow of the twin moons crossing the dense canopy, stood a blue-furred, winged creature with a short tail that moved occasionally with apparent curiosity. Its body was compact, no larger than a typical pet animal, with short claws that gleamed like white crystals. The Florix's fangs were barely visible, just the tips protruding from its small muzzle as it sniffed at something in a hole in the tree. Its most striking feature, however, was its oversized eyes with perfectly round pupils that seemed to absorb the darkness around them, reflecting back an intelligence that seemed at odds with its diminutive size. The video showed it using its small muzzle to sniff something in the hole in the tree, its whiskers longer than the hole itself. Growing frustrated with whatever eluded its reach, the Florix pushed its whole head inside the hollow, wings folded tight against its body as it strained forward. For a moment, it appeared to be making progress, then suddenly found itself comically stuck. Its back legs scrambled against the tree bark, finding no purchase as it struggled. Finally, using its front paws with surprising dexterity, it managed to free itself, only to tumble backward with its belly up, wings splayed awkwardly as it rolled onto the ground comically. Zahner pointed the recording device to the unremarkable leaves on the ground, and his voice came through clearly, tinged with disbelief and more than a little annoyance.
"Are you serious, Professor? I can't believe all those warnings and serious talk was because of that clumsy, cute creature. You made it sound like we were hunting apex predators, not filming the galaxy's equivalent of a stuffed toy."
The professor began to explain.
"If you would just listen."
But Zahner cut him off.
"No, you listen. You've been going on about mortal danger since we landed." "That's because nothing. That thing is adorable. It couldn't hurt a larva if it tried." "If you would just let me. You're unbelievable,"
Zahner continued, his frustration evident in every word.
"I'm even wondering if you have the credits to honor my contract for bringing me to this world as an assistant. Was this whole expedition just some elaborate joke?"
The professor finally lost his patience off camera as Zahner lowered the recording device a bit too far.
"You're a very bad assistant who is currently recording the ground instead of the subject. You're a fool if you think the Florix is just a harmless creature."
His voice dropped to a hiss.
"What you so dismissively described as cute is the apex animal of the galaxy. It has 7 different ways to kill you without even touching you. And what you call clumsy is a sassy behavior of a creature that doesn't need to fear anything in this ecosystem. In the jungle of this death world, Anything that has the privilege to be so silly must be at the very top of that food chain. That's basic logic. Something you seem to struggle with, Zana.
That little thing. Zonner's voice now showed hints of conviction wavering. After briefly capturing the professor's displeased face, with its scales flushed a darker shade in what was clearly the Gridarian equivalent of anger, the video returned its focus on the distant creature. The Florix was now in a small clearing, licking its paws as if it didn't have a single concern in the world, its wings occasionally stretching out to catch the warming rays of the rising sun. The video remained fixed on the scene for a few minutes, capturing the Florix's seemingly innocent grooming ritual. Zonner eventually broke the silence, his voice considerably more subdued than before. I still find it hard to believe that this little thing is a predator to anything other than small animals and insects. It looks like it would run from its own shadow. The professor simply sighed, a sound that conveyed clear resignation and a certain professional patience. You'll see it in action in due time, if you're competent enough with that recording device. Let me offer an explanation. Not for you, since you're clearly a lost cause, but for posterity and whoever will use this video in the future. You're insufferable, you know that? Zonner muttered. Yet in the end, he still asked for the explanation, shifting to the image of the professor himself, likely tired of recording the Florix licking its paws. Fine, educate me, O wise one. The professor's expression shifted from irritation to the unmistakable enthusiasm of a scientist about to share his life's work. Record the horizon behind me, he ordered, pointing with a scaled finger. The image shook as Zonner adjusted his position, then moved to what looked like a mountain in the distance. Still dark in the very early morning. 2 moons of different sizes shone bright in the background, one tinged with amber, and the other a pale blue, casting competing shadows across the landscape. What's so interesting about that mountain? Zonner asked, confusion evident in his voice. All I can see is more purple leaves and rocks. Of course, the professor said, his tone suggesting he expected nothing less. The most important thing are always hidden from eyes of fools, even if one said fool is looking directly at it. There was a smug satisfaction in his voice that suggested he enjoyed these moments of intellectual superiority. Zonner just sighed, the camera wobbling slightly with the exhalation. The professor finally relented and explained, the thing we're looking is not a mountain, but the very reason why the Florix evolved to be the galactic apex predator. The image shifted back to the professor, who was now fully in his element, eyes bright with passion. Such mountains exist everywhere on this planet, he explained, making quotation marks with the scaled fingers. They are actually flagships that crash-landed on this world after a space battle in the past so distant that no smart species remembers it. The wrecks have become a part of the landscape, overgrown and weathered until they're undistinguishable from natural formations to the untrained eye. The professor leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to the conspiratorial whisper. The Florix, at some point in their evolutionary path, learned to drink the fluid that leaked from the ship's cores. And not only did they not die from exposure to what could have been lethal radiation, but they gained a range of abilities from it. Abilities they've had 500 million years to refine and perfect. The core fluid mutated them, changing their DNA in ways I'm still trying to understand. Are you saying, Zonner finally asked with a shaking voice, that the Florix is an artificial species? The professor laughed, a genuine sound of amusement this time. No, they aren't artificial. They're a natural species that evolved in an unusual environment with access to strange and aged core fluid that shaped them into what they are today. The universe is full of such oddities, Zonner. That's what makes xenobiology so fascinating. It's strange that you know so much about this, Zonner said, the camera zooming in on the professor's face, capturing every scale and wrinkle. Have you come to this world before? The professor's expression changed subtly, something dark passing behind his yellow eyes.
Perhaps you're not a lost cause after all, Zoner. You're at least a bit observant.
He nodded slowly, his crest lowering slightly in what appeared to be a gesture of remembered pain.
Yes, I've been here before, with a full research team. We were spotted by a Florix.
He swallowed hard, the scales on his throat rippling with emotion.
I was the only survivor.
The image shook as Zoner presumably reacted to this revelation. The professor continued, his voice distant.
I wasn't even able to recover their research and was forced to leave the planet. Such a pity,
he said, the last words with a detachment that suggested years of emotional suppression.
So I'm expendable?
Zoner asked, fear evident in his voice. The camera wavered, suggesting his hand was trembling.
No.
The professor quickly assured him, though his tone wasn't entirely convincing.
I wouldn't be happy if anything happened to you, Zoner. You may be irritating, but you're a decent assistant when you actually listen.
He fixed Zoner with a stern look.
I just won't be particularly sad either if you ignore my warnings and get yourself killed by the cute, harmless creature. Your choice, really.
Zoner started to say something, perhaps a retort or a resignation from his position, when suddenly the professor grabbed his binoculars, raising them to his eyes with such speed that the movement was barely captured by the camera. He stared with wide eyes at the Florix, his breath catching audibly.
Hurry, capture this!
He whispered urgently, reaching out to adjust the direction of Zoner's camera.
Something's approaching the Florix. We can't miss it.
There was a mixture of excitement and what might have been fear in his voice as the camera swung widely to refocus on the small blue creature in the distance. The Florix was now alert, its playful demeanor vanishing in an instant. Its ears flattened against its head, and its wings unfurled slightly in a defensive posture as it stared intently at a section of a dense jungle where the shrubs were moving erratically. The motion sent small creatures fleeing into the air, their translucent wings shining as they reflected the early morning light. The Florix remained perfectly still, its only movement the occasional swing of its tail and the steady rise and fall of its chest. From behind the thrashing vegetation emerged a bipedal creature with a patch of fur on the top of its head. It was dressed in garments of green and black that offered no camouflage whatsoever in the world of purple leaves. Its exposed skin was a pale tan color, contrasting sharply with the vibrant hues of the Death World jungle. The creature moved with confident strides, seemingly unconcerned about making noise or concealing its presence. It stood much taller than the Florix, with long limbs and an upright posture that spoke of higher intelligence. The camera suddenly swung back to the professor, who was visibly agitated. His scales had darkened with excitement, and the bioluminescent streaks on his crest were blinking rapidly.
Don't you dare miss a single moment to record me anymore,
he ordered in a low, intense voice, grabbing Zoner's arm so tightly that the camera shook.
We can't miss this, even if it cost our lives. A human and a Florix just met in the wild. Can you freaking believe it?
The professor's usually measured tone had given way to raw enthusiasm, his final words almost a reverent whisper. A human? Zoner asked, confusion evident in his voice as he returned the camera to the Florix and the newly identified creature.
Wait, Professor, you shouldn't bet other people's lives for your recordings like that. I didn't sign up to die for xenobiology.
Shut up! The professor snapped, not taking his eyes off the scene unfolding before them.
We can't miss this. We're about to record the two most dangerous creatures of the galaxy meeting. This video alone would be worth more than the lives of 100 incompetent assistants.
There was no hint of humor in his voice, just cold calculation and scientific fervor. The microphone picked up the audible sound of Zoner swallowing hard as he tried to keep the camera focused on the two alien creatures. He didn't even point out that the professor had just thrown the name human into the conversation without explaining what it was. too focused on keeping his hands steady as the tension in the clearing mounted. The Florix was the first to make a move. Its eyes began to glow brightly with an eerie blue luminescence, intensifying until they were like twin stars in its small face. Suddenly, the image on the recording device was overtaken by static, distorting everything into unrecognizable visual noise. The audio captured a high-pitched whine that seemed to drill directly into the brain. Zahner moved the camera away in panic, inadvertently capturing the professor doubled over, violently throwing up on the ground. The Gradaran scales had paled dramatically, taking on a sickly gray hue as he wiped his mouth with a trembling hand. "We're distant enough from the sonic wave to not be affected so much." The professor gasped between heaves. "Keep focus and resist the nausea. This is unprecedented footage." Despite his obvious discomfort, his voice still carried the unmistakable tone of excitement. Zahner didn't reply, but the video shakily returned to the Florix and human. Surprisingly, the human was laughing, casually spitting on the ground as if it merely clearing a bad taste from its mouth. A low sound captured faintly from the distance appeared on the video. "Nice try, little one," the human said, its voice carrying clearly through the jungle air. "But we humans are more resistant than most, and I trained myself to resist psionic attacks." The creature's mouth formed what appeared to be a smile, a gesture that somehow seemed both friendly and predatory at once. "That was one of the 7 ways a Florix can kill from a distance," the professor explained, his voice still weak but steadying. "A psionic wave. It's deadly to most species in the galaxy. It disrupts neural patterns, causing immediate disorientation, followed by systematic organ failure." He wiped his mouth again, straightening up with visible effort. "The fact that this human barely flinched. Fascinating." Zahner said nothing this time, instead zooming in on the human's face. The creature was still laughing, staring intently at the little Florix. Its eyes, a striking shade of green, showed no fear, only curiosity and perhaps a hint of respect. The Florix, now serious, regarded the bigger creature before it with an intensity that seemed almost calculating, its earlier playfulness entirely gone. "Should we leave?" Zahner whispered, his voice barely audible on the recording. "That thing nearly killed us from here." The professor just shushed him with an impatient gesture. "I want to see what the human does when the voices speak in his head. This is the real test." The eyes of the Florix began to glow again, this time emitting a deep red light that seemed filled with malevolent intent. Zahner's voice suddenly came through, confused and alarmed. "Who is that? Why are you asking me to shoot the professor?" His breathing became rapid and shallow, the camera wobbling dangerously in his grip. The professor turned to him, his typical detachment momentarily replaced by concern. "You're not the target. It should be easy for you to ignore the voices. They're just overflow from the main attack." He glanced back toward the human. "The human must be experiencing hell right now, with hundreds of voices in its head telling it to kill itself. It's a psychological assault that few species can withstand." Zahner, visibly shaking in fear, began to stammer. That was terrifying. The voices were so clear, so convincing." "Capture the human's face." The professor cut him off, pointing urgently. "This information is invaluable. We need to document its reaction." The shaking image zoomed in on the human's face again. Remarkably, the creature seemed unperturbed, though beads of sweat had formed on its brow. Its voice carried again from the distance, slightly strained but still casual. Not bad at all," the human praised, wiping its forehead with the back of its hand. "But the voices are just cute compared to my own schizophrenia." It tapped the side of its head with one finger. "When you hear voices all the time, what's a few more?" The professor's voice was full of fascination. "Incredible! Neither has been killed so far. Humans aren't known for their patience against aggression.
and the Florix usually doesn't have to use its skill more than once. This is unprecedented.
Zonner's camera captured both the human and the Florix, now locked in what appeared to be a silent standoff. I don't understand. Why are they just staring at each other and doing nothing?
Look closely,
the professor whispered.
The human's hand is moving slowly toward its belt. If the Florix doesn't kill the human with its next attack, I believe the human will have time to draw its gun, and then it will be over. Either way, we're witnessing history.
Zonner zoomed out, just in time to register a different glow in the Florix's eyes. A amber light that seemed to bend the very air around it. Suddenly, rocks and wood logs around the clearing began to float, hovering momentarily before flowing toward the human like deadly projectiles.
Telekinesis!
The professor breathed, its voice filled with awe.
Another skill that's deadly from a distance. The Florix is manipulating matter directly with its mind.
Zonner captured the human having a hard time with this assault, being forced to jump around and dodge the flying debris. The dance continued for nearly a minute, the human displaying impressive agility as it twisted and rolled to avoid being crushed. Eventually, the Florix's attacks began to slow, the objects failing to the ground with less force.
The human has won this exchange,
the professor observed, his tone clinical despite the spectacle.
The Florix has tired itself out. Telekinesis requires immense energy expenditure. Now the human will draw his gun. This is perhaps a typical result when humans and Florix encounter each other in the wild.
Zonner zoomed in on the human, expecting to see a weapon. Instead, to their surprise, the creature was holding what, upon further zooming, looked like a piece of dried meat, dark and preserved, held carefully between its fingers.
What is it doing?
Zonner asked, confusion evident in his voice.
Is that food?
The professor seemed equally perplexed.
I don't understand. Why would it place food in front of a predator that just tried to kill it 3 times?
The human set the piece of meat on the ground in front of the Florix and retreated to sit on a nearby rock, maintaining eye contact with the creature but making no threatening moves.
This is idiotic,
the professor muttered.
It's letting the creature rest. The Florix will recover its strength and finish the human with its next attack. No species survives multiple concentrated attacks from a Florix, not even humans.
A long standoff ensued, the recording capturing the tense silence as the Florix began to cautiously sniff the piece of meat. It kept its eyes fixed on the human, neither retreating nor consuming the offering.
The human is trying to befriend the creature,
the professor concluded, incredulity evident in his voice.
But it will never work. The Florix isn't a domesticated pet. It's an apex predator. The human will be dead within minutes.
Time passed with little action, and events began to unfold as the professor had predicted. The Florix's eyes glowed blue again, and the human suddenly clutched at its chest, its breathing becoming labored. The creature fell to one knee, its face contorted in pain. Then, unexpectedly, the human laughed. A strange sound, but a laugh nonetheless. It reached for something at its belt, and Zonner tensed, expecting to see a weapon at last.
That's not a gun,
the professor corrected, likely peering through his binoculars.
It looks like some kind of medical device.
Indeed, the human produced a small cylindrical object and unhesitatingly jabbed it into its thigh. Almost immediately, its posture straightened and its breathing normalized.
You almost got me that time, little one.
The human's voice carried across the clearing.
But nothing that some extra adrenaline can't solve. Nice try, though. I respect the effort.
The Florix now stared at the human with wide eyes, its expression almost comical in its confusion. The human simply approached it again, taking the dried meat from the ground and placing it right in front of the Florix's nostrils.
Eat.
The human's voice came again, gentle but firm.
If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't need poison.
Utterly impressive, the professor whispered, his earlier certainty replaced by scientific wonder.
Don't miss the details, Honor. This defies everything we know about interactions with Florix.
The recording continued as the human sat cross-legged in front of the Florix, whose confusion was evident in its lowered ears and swishing tail. The standoff lasted for what seemed like hours, until the creature eventually gave in to the tempting smell and began to eat the piece of meat, its eyes never leaving the human. Despite its obvious distrust, it made no further attempt to attack, even though it had clearly rested enough to do so. The red sun of the planet had risen fully now, bathing the clearing in a warm crimson light. The human gradually became more tactile with the little creature, occasionally reaching out to touch its wing or stroke its back. The Florix seemed annoyed by these liberties, yet not annoyed enough to retaliate. It simply huffed and shifted position, sometimes batting at the human's hand with a paw that could have easily torn through flesh. "My knees can't take it anymore," Zahner complained, his voice strained from hours of crouching. "I'm tired of recording this. Nothing's happening." "Shut up and continue," the professor ordered, though his own voice betrayed his fatigue. "This is valuable data." Eventually, when the image was already being handled poorly with bad framing and incorrect focus, the human's voice came from the distance again. The creature was speaking to the little Florix as it could understand every word, its tone conversational and friendly. "Aren't you tired of bullying the big creatures of this world?" the human asked, gesturing expansively at the jungle around them. "Don't you want to see the wider galaxy?" It pointed upward, toward the sky visible through gaps in the canopy. The Florix, swaying its tail lazily, just stared at the human and emitted a strange chirping sound that was neither threatening nor particularly friendly. "There are countless weird creatures out there that you could bully instead," the human continued, undeterred by the lack of comprehension. "I could get you an endless supply of opportunities to show your strength if you follow me. What do you say to that, little death machine?" Zahner tried to ask something, but was immediately shushed by the professor. The video showed the Florix regarding the human for a long, tense moment. Then, to the observer's amazement, it climbed onto the human's shoulder, settling there like it had found its natural perch. Together, the strange pair disappeared into the woods, the human's confident strides unimpeded by its deadly passenger. What did we just witness? Zahner finally turned the camera to the professor, whose expression was unreadable. "Either an isolated case that will be the star of a legend," the professor said slowly, his voice heavy with implication, "or the end of a galactic order we once know it." "It can't be that bad," Zahner began to argue, but the professor cut him off with a sharp gesture. "I've lost interest in observing the Florix," he said abruptly. "We're going back to my ship, and you will be paid triple the agreed value to never speak of what you saw to anyone." His tone left no room for negotiation. "I don't understand," Zahner started, but the professor simply reached for the recording device, and the image suddenly ended. End of transcription. According to historical records, this footage remained classified in the Xenobiology archives for nearly 300 cycles before being released to the public. By then, the alliance between humans and Florix was already the foundation of the most formidable military force the galaxy had ever known. What began as a chance encounter in a purple jungle eventually reshaped the power balance of the known universe. The symbiotic relationship defied all previous scientific understanding. Humans provided the Florix with the adventure and the challenge they craved, while the Florix offered humans protection and abilities that no technology could replicate. It was a partnership built not on domination, but on mutual respect between species who recognized something of themselves in each other. Professor Sorvar's subsequent career was marked by controversy. His insistence on the dangers of the human-Florix alliance was dismissed as paranoia by the Scientific Council, who considered the footage a carefully staged hoax. By the time the Council acknowledged the truth of his warnings, the first beast tamer outpost had already been established on 8 worlds. As for Zahner, rumors persisted that he broke his agreement with the professor and sold copies of the footage to several xenobiological institutes. These rumors were never confirmed, but the assistant disappeared from all public records shortly after the expedition. Whether by choice or force, remains one of the enduring mysteries of the early beast tamer age.